As much as I liked to think that I was very open and cultural, kind of accepting person, it really challenges you when you have to take off your clothes for strangers.
Meet Palle Bo, a digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world.
My girlfriend wasn't thrilled with it.
You wanted me to get a job.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
I know that I promised you an interview with Tarek, but some exciting stuff is happening right now. Some stuff that I'd like to get into that episode, and we're not quite there yet. So Tarek and I, we've decided to wait a bit and save it for later, so we get everything in when I publish that episode. Trust me, it's well worth the wait. Instead, here's another conversation with a full-time traveler, and this guy is quite a character with an interesting story. His name is Greg, but he goes by the name of Curtin.
Yeah, birth name is Gregory West Curtin, and my first school that I remember going to, there were two Gregs. So I was Greg C, which is terrible.
Sounds a bit like a rap name.
Yeah, Greg C. There was Greg M, Greg C. And didn't like that, and I started playing sports, and they call you by your surname, so it just stuck. Curtin. More memorable when I travel. Yeah. Easier to say than Gregory in some cultures.
And my name is Palle Bo, a name that is difficult to say in any other culture than the Scandinavian. However, it is my name, and I feel it's too late to change it now. This is episode 106 of the Radio Vagabond podcast. Before we continue, let me remind you that this episode is supported in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotel rooms, guest houses, and hostels around the world. Hotels25.com. You should try it. It actually works. I met Curtin on the Nomad Cruise number 7 from Barcelona to Brazil. And he's the kind of guy that when he gets into a new place, he really emerges into the culture and makes an effort to learn the language.
Yeah, I don't think I do it the way other people do it. I don't, print out notes and study the grammar on some app. I just kind of throw myself into situations, and I'm not afraid of making a fool of myself. So you learn pretty quickly. Yeah. I ordered a massage for a mutual friend of ours the other day. And she wanted me to call on the phone. I said, oh boy, reading Portuguese is okay, but listening to it on a phone, maybe not the best. But I made the appointment, and asked if she could pay with card. Is she available now? What kind of massage is it? Where are you located? What time are you open? And I was surprised I could do all of that. And, sometimes you just surprise yourself. You don't have to take it so seriously and just try.
So it's not your first time in Brazil?
It is my first time in South America.
Oh my God.
I had never been to a Portuguese region until this year. I went to Macau, Cape Verde, Portugal, and now Brazil. So I've hit 4 of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's the year of Portuguese.
Right. Cape Verde is also Portuguese.
Yeah. I think I'm just missing Mozambique and maybe, I don't know, a few other tiny places.
By now, I'm sure you can tell that Curtin is American.
Born in 85, born in Philadelphia, but moved fairly soon when I was a baby. And I lived in a bunch of places in the U.S., mostly, 9 years in the South, more than a decade in the Midwest, some years in the Northeast, and then out in Idaho as well. So I say everything but Florida, Texas, and California. I've pretty much lived in the rest of the U.S., apart from those 3 well-known places. But I was doing a pretty normal U.S. life. I had played American football and basketball, baseball, track, swimming, soccer, volleyball, wrestling, all the sports. And my first week at university, I had a pretty bad day at training. And the coach came over and watched one thing that I did, and he wasn't that impressed. So I realized if I stayed on this team, it was going to be 4 years of just kind of mediocrity. So I decided, you know what, this is my university, I don't want to do this, and I walked off to pitch. And I had my boots with me. And as I was walking off through the campus, I saw another guy walking the other way with his boots. similar boots for sports like this. And he said, "Why do you have your boots?" And I said, "I just quit." I said, "Why do you have your boots?" He said, "I'm going to rugby training. You should come." So I just joined him. And we were late for rugby, and the coach was smoking a cigar. He was like 70 years old. I was like, "Why are you late?" You know, and I loved it right away. Just the kind of, everybody can play, just get out there and kick ass and hit somebody. And he put me in the match 2 days later, even though I didn't know the rules. And I got a lot of penalties and made a lot of mistakes. But it was so fun. And everybody was kind of like brothers. And that's what got me playing rugby. And after 2 years, I got pretty good. Met some friends in the team from Europe and decided to quit America and live with my friend's mother in England and play rugby in the local town. But it was great stuff. The English lads were much thicker and stronger and more experienced than my American rugby friends. So even though they were playing at like a lower level, like maybe 4 levels down from the top, the quality was much higher. And I was the only American they'd ever had at the team. So I had a lot of pressure to stand out. And I made a good impression and didn't find a job, really. That was the whole point of going. But played a lot of rugby and spent all my money and ended up in Germany and Netherlands and really enjoyed Europe. And I said, I have to do more of this. I really understood that I could live my life on my own terms. I was sleeping in a tent in the city, not paying for a hostel or hotel or anything. I started doing couch surfing for the first time. And
that was must have been in the very beginning of couch surfing.
This is before the crash. I think they had a crash in late 06 or 07, if I remember correctly. But I was hosting and surfing, and I've had a few hundred experiences since then. So I'm actually an admin now on the Facebook group. So it's been a life-changing experiences. So that's how I left the US in 2006.
I'm pretty sure that you already know this, but couch surfing is where you either host people in a spare room or on a couch, or stay with locals for free around the world. Not only is it a great way to save money, but more importantly, you get to make friends with local people that are almost always open-minded and like to talk. It's something I've used a lot on my journey, and something I'm going to use a lot more in the future. See more about this platform on couchsurfing.com. The trip to Europe in 2006 was where Curtin really caught the travel bug.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can take anything you can throw at me, and nothing can get me down. Life is looking so bright, the sun is up again. I'm feeling like I could fly. No clouds in my way, no. And I'm living the good life. And I'm living the good life now. I'm living the good life, and nothing can get me down, no.
After 2006, my dad said, "Hey, do you want to go back to university and maybe finish and also play football?" And this was in Kentucky. I'd never lived in Kentucky, didn't have any friends in Kentucky. I'd barely been through Kentucky, but I said, yeah, sure, why not? So, sight unseen, I just moved to Kentucky and basically did 4 months there, regular life, was getting stronger, playing sports. Then I was diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And that really affected my athletics. I couldn't gain weight. I lost a bunch of muscle mass. I had problems with energy. For type 1s like me, it's genetic. It's a trait that kind of lives dormantly inside of you until something sparks it into action.
What sparked it?
So for me, it was a tooth infection. They don't have this proven, but they believe that it's usually some kind of head injury. Usually it happens in children, an illness or a wound or something, and your body looks at your DNA and says, oh, we're supposed to have diabetes. And then your pancreas just stops working. So for me, it was a tooth infection in April of 2007. And I finished the year at Kentucky, and I decided I'm not going to play sports anymore at the high level, like the American football. I'm just going to keep doing my rugby, even though I was getting weaker and having some problems with injuries. So I decided to study overseas in Vienna. And for some reason, they let me in an Erasmus program as an American. Oh. So I was in Vienna with a bunch of Greeks and Polish and French, people, which was great. And again, not really being a nomad, but while living in Vienna, traveling all over the Balkans and the Baltic countries and Central Europe and Russia and Turkey and all these things. So that kind of fueled my desire to travel, my need. And after that, I did studies in London, and then I came back to the US and decided school was too expensive. So I quit again. I moved to Chicago, again, no job, no place.
Why Chicago?
I had always kind of wanted to live there. I spent a lot of time in Indiana, which is next to Chicago. Yeah. As a child, we used to get Chicago television and Chicago sports.
It's such a great city.
It is,
one of my favorite
I'd
US
heard that,
cities.
right?
Yeah,
and so I finally lived there, and I ended up living in Chicago twice. I really, really enjoyed it. I love Chicago. I like the winter, I like the summer, I love the people, summer dance.
I was there in the summer. It gets pretty cold in the winter.
Yeah, very cold. But I like it because it's like a test. If you survive the winter, you really enjoy the spring.
Yeah. When Curtin lived in Chicago, he'd signed up to get some deals on cheap flights in his email. And one day, he got a great deal on a flight to Hong Kong. And he'd never been to Asia before.
So this was very exciting to me. So I did. I went to Hong Kong and Shenzhen. But when I came back about a month later, I moved in with my girlfriend and, didn't have a job. So as charming as I was, she kind of put pressure on me to go work somewhere, which was good. And I didn't want to get another boring job. So I thought, what do I like doing? And I like dancing at the clubs. I didn't know how you could make money doing that. But I went around Chicago, and it turns out you can dance for big money. I was assuming like electronic music, just kind of pump your fists in the air. But you have to dance for men because they're the ones that pay. Women don't pay crap.
Oh.
I learned. And you would just wear these like little shorts, and you'd be on the stage one at a time for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And then you would get either drink coupons and cash or cash only. You could do tips as well. Sometimes you could do other things like private dances or whatnot. But then there was at least one club that was all nude. And people say it's stripping, but it's not. You start nude, you finish nude. And the lights are so bright you can't really see anything. There were about 15% of the dancers, I would say, were straight and 85% gay. So a lot of the gay dancers would do other stuff for more money. But for the straight dancers, we would just show up for 1 hour. We would work 20 minutes of the hour and make $200 to $300 US in cash. And it was always at night, so you'd have your whole day free.
Yeah.
And I used to make $100 a day doing my sales job, working 9 hours in the snow.
In the snow.
And now I was working 20 minutes, just dancing to music that I chose, making 3 times that.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good deal, But my girlfriend wasn't thrilled with it.
You wanted me to get a job.
Yeah, exactly. That's of course the man's comeback line. But it was a really great experience because as much as I liked to think that I was very open and cultural, kind of accepting person, it really challenges you when you have to take off your clothes for strangers. And they say no cameras, but you don't know. Maybe someone's taking a video and maybe you'll be online the next day. It's very kind of threatening to who you are. But you do it a few times and you really get comfortable in your own skin, literally. Once I finished university, I was looking for a job in New York and Boston with my finance degree. And again, I get a spam email, like fly from Chicago to Shanghai for like $600 round trip. And I decided I want a job in the US doing finance, but maybe I'll go make some connections in China and leverage it, come back to New York. So I flew to Shanghai, and I was going to stay for a month and go back to New York. But 8 days later, I found a job, and I got hired in the town of Wuxi. And that was kind of the beginning of my Asian experience.
Curtin ended up spending 2 or 3 years in Asia, and in October 2014, he was living in Shanghai, China.
And I was really having the time of my life. My Chinese was pretty good. I had great roommates. I had a couple of good jobs part-time. Really easy life, really relaxed. Really enjoyed. It was the best time, you could ask for. But for some reason, my ambition was gone. And nothing was really there to challenge me. And I got a weird text message from a woman, a Chinese woman. And I didn't know who she was. She had said that she had tried to contact me for some traveling with her friends a few years ago through couchsurfing, but we had never met up. But she had my phone number or something. So she asked me if I was in Shanghai and if she wanted to meet me for a drink. And I said, well, let's not do a drink. Let's do a coffee in the daytime. Maybe it's safer that way, So I meet this...
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of scams, especially India, China. You never know, like, you see a pretty face and some believable story, and you meet at night for a drink at 10 p.m. The next thing you know, you're in a back of a car somewhere,
Okay.
So you never know. So I thought, let's just meet for coffee. So the next day we meet, and she shows up with a broken ankle. And so she's kind of hobbling around, and she asked me to carry her into the toilet.
Did you think this is part of the scam?
No, to be honest, as soon as I saw her, her personality matched her appearance, kind of her very kind of naive innocence, like childlike wonder. And I realized this is just a different kind of woman who is very direct and honest and a bit silly at the same time. It was endearing. And I was attracted to this kind of spirit that she had. I wanted to know more. How could you grow up in China like all my other friends there? And how could you turn out so differently? So it's very, very curious person. And we had a 5-hour coffee conversation, and ended up carrying her back to the metro with her broken ankle. And basically, I wanted to go on a date with her, and I asked her on a date. And she told me yes. And when the date came around, I messaged her, and she said, well, no, I live in Uganda. And I said, the country in East Africa? She said, yeah. And I said, I don't understand. You're a Chinese girl from China. I met you in China. Usually they live in China, But she had told me that she'd been living out there for about 2 years. And she had just come home to meet some family. And she made a quirky line about, if you want to date me, you're going to have to move here. And that's all the spark I needed. I said, you know what? This is some ambition. This is some challenge. I've never visited Africa, let alone lived there.
So you said, challenge accepted.
Yeah, so I told her I'm moving. And after a few Skype calls and making some arrangements, I moved to Kampala, the capital city. It was definitely a change. All my language skills were pretty much useless, and my knowledge of China didn't matter. And I had to learn how to survive, on the streets at nights, how to haggle, how to deal with colleagues and shopkeepers, and everything was brand new again, which is very exciting for me. But end of one chapter, beginning of another. And it was a Friday when I arrived, and by the following weekend, I think we had already broken up. So it was a very short-lived relationship. I ended up dating her friend for about 9 months. We were much more suitable. I got to know her better. I think moving to a continent for somebody you met just for a few hours is probably silly, but it was very exciting.
What the hell?
And if it did work out, it'd be a great story, great love story. But we had a nice time. It was a small Chinese community, so everybody knew each other. A couple of people got married, Chinese who met in Kampala, so that was nice.
You're listening to the Radio Vagabond podcast. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you that I would be so thrilled if you shared it on Facebook or Twitter. And now, back to the show.
I left Uganda 2 years after I arrived. And I went to
That was a long time you spent there.
Yeah, I told myself I wanted to set some roots because I kept moving around so much. And for some reason, I chose Uganda to set roots. It was quite difficult after 2 years to kind of change my expectations to be able to be happy there. I just wish that people had more trust between each other, but I saw too many good people get turned to the dark side, if you will, by just other people treating them poorly. And the more and more people that kind of gave up, the more pessimistic I became. Anyway, so I moved directly to Sweden, from hot to cold, black to white, poor to rich.
Whoa, time out. Sweden. Why? China to Uganda and then Sweden. Why not?
3 very different places. When I was in Uganda, I met a woman who told me about this thing, Nomad Cruise, which was, people that like to buzz around the world and make money somehow and just keep traveling. And they take these ships across the Atlantic Ocean back and forth. And I said, wow, that sounds really cool. I'd never been on a big ship before. Let's do it. So I signed up for the next one, which was leaving in maybe December, yeah, from Spain, from the Canary Islands. And I was in Uganda in maybe summertime. And I said, okay, I want to leave, but I need to stay in Europe to go to the cruise. So I wanted to travel around Europe, see some of my old friends, some of my ex-girlfriends that we'd kept in touch, some friends of friends that lived in Italy or Portugal. And I was dating a girl in Uganda at the time who was French-American. And she did not like this idea of me visiting old exes in Europe.
I'm going on a European tour, visiting old girlfriends.
Yeah, so I understood. So I was like, okay. And she suggested her dad lives in Stockholm. She said, well, why don't you just live with my dad for a few months? I said, okay, yeah, why not? Get to know the family. So that was fun. That was the reason I went. And they had a dog. So I'd walk the dog and collect the mail and speak some Swedish to the neighbors and just have a very peaceful, quiet, clean life. Kind of recover from the Uganda hectic.
Very
stuff.
Different from Kampala, I could imagine.
Yeah, indeed. So from Sweden, I joined Nomad Cruise, and
So which cruise was that? Number 5?
Number 3.
3. Oh, all the way back to number 3. Wow.
Yeah. And that got me into the Nomad community. And since then, I've been getting jobs through Nomads. I've been visiting Nomads in Hong Kong, London, Berlin, Las Vegas. There's thousands of us now, and I've been to Chiang Mai and Barcelona and all these like nomad hubs, if you will, where you just see tons and tons of people working remotely and having their own shops. So now it's quite nice.
In last week's interview, I spoke to another cruiser, Matt Bowles, about the different communities for nomads, like Remote Year and Hacker's Paradise and Nomad Cruise. And we talked about becoming part of a community, part of a tribe or a family. Curtin adds another layer to this.
One word I will use is relief. I think a lot of us are very relieved that we don't have to explain ourselves to each other. I think when we meet most people, especially when we travel to new countries, we have to say, like, yes, I'm from here. No, I don't have a house. No, I'm not married. No, I don't have a plan for the next 5 years. Yes, I like traveling. no, I don't know where I'm going next. And a lot of people really just put you in a box, and you just become the travel person. But within our group, everyone's the travel person. So we all have to find something else, like, oh, you're the storyteller, or you're like the kind one that always is thinking of, you know, like, do you have the right toothpaste for this? Because you're allergic to this one chemical. Oh, thanks for reminding me. And did you make sure to stamp your visa at this office before we go to that office, or else you can't get in? There's people that are very helpful. There's people that
just to put that into perspective, just before we started recording, there was another guy here who's also type A diabetes, and you say it can be challenging to get the medicine when you're in new places, and he said, well, I might have some to spare because he was about to go back to Europe. So it's that part of the...
Exactly. I mean, we have the same medicine, so you know, it's not like we're sharing needles or doing something illegal. We both understand how difficult it is to travel with the diabetes, and he's willing to help out. It's a nice community where you ask better questions. You don't just say, "Oh, why are you traveling?" or "Where are you from?" You say things like, "What do you want to create? What kind of community do you want to be a part of? What are you looking for in your life?" And because we're all over the world, you always have a chance to run into somebody, even if it's a mutual friend. You know, like oh, you and I know this guy, and he knows somebody, and they're going to introduce me to so and so. And thanks to the internet, we can all kind of keep up.
Yeah. I remember when I started traveling, a week into my journey, I attended a TBEX travel media conference in Stockholm, of all places. Yeah. And that was a week into it, and up until that point, I was always having to explain what I was doing to my friends who thought, oh, that sounds cool, but kind of weird. And then all of a sudden, I'm in Stockholm with 500 like-minded people, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm with my people here.
Yeah. What's really nice is that it kind of allows you to take the next level up. For example, on these cruises and the nomad community in general, there are some fully nomadic people who are making plenty of money. Then there are the people that have real jobs, that have a side hustle, and they like to travel often. You have your remote workers with full-time jobs, but they're allowed to move around. And you have your freelancers who take work when they want to. And then you have all your people who are just interested in becoming nomadic. So you take this mix of people and you have inspiration, you have cautionary tales, you have people to support each other. Even now, in about half an hour, I'm meeting with a guy. He has some money to put into an idea. I had the idea last night. I mentioned it. Some people were joking around, but he said, no, I like that idea. Let's have a meeting. Let's talk about distribution. Let's talk about sourcing. Let's talk about revenue sharing. And we can go from a joke at dinner to a full company in a week. Even though we're in Brazil, we're not, I'm not from Brazil, he's not from Brazil. But we can open the company in, let's say, Hong Kong or Estonia this week. We can have his bank account. We can have, my name and logo, and we can just do it. Because we're both very flexible and we both focus on the important things. I think most people would say, oh, everything seems so fast. Let's do some market research. Let's wait a year. I don't know how I feel about this risk. But with a lot of these nomads, they're used to living on the edge. And they're able to take advantage of things much quicker. So I like it.
By the way, Curtin is about to start his own podcast with another nomad cruiser, Martin Locklear. In fact, they came up with the idea when we were crossing the Atlantic. Many things can happen when you confine 500 nomads on a ship, like starting a podcast. They told me that they already started recording, but haven't put out any episodes at this time when I'm recording this. But it's coming soon, and you can check out Curtin's website for updates. It's americarex.com.
That's America, like the country, and Rex, like T-Rex, R-E-X, .com.
What does that stand for?
Oh, well, it's quite silly. In 2012, I was in Athens, Greece, watching the Olympics in London. And every time an athlete would come on the screen, they would show the flag, their country. And the flag was kind of a slanted shape at a funny angle. And every time they showed a US athlete, I thought that the funny kind of warped rectangle looked like a T-Rex head. So I started to draw this red, white, and blue T-Rex head, American flag, and I showed it to all my friends, and they said, that looks nothing like it. So a week later, I was in Romania, and I decided to get a tattoo of the T-Rex America flag with the teeth and everything. So now I can show people, look, it's a T-Rex head. So people said I was crazy, and when I came to deciding on a website, I said, why not? I already have the brand. Let's make it.
I'll put a link to this in the show notes and on the radiovagabond.com. And on Monday morning, on New Year's Day, you will get a regular travel episode. You can join me as I arrive to Rabat in Morocco and start chasing visas for a lot of African countries. And that turns out to be hard work. My name is Palle Bo. Happy Christmas, and see you Monday for the final episode of 2018.